Hello and welcome to the video. Today we have a short story titled The Hanged Men Gang Part 2. I hope you enjoy. The road the newly refurbished wagon followed grew busier the closer it got to town. Farmers, townsfolk and other travellers came and went from the settlement, filling the stretch of road with their animals and vehicles. Frostvale, like so many towns of its size, was surrounded by farmland, but there were buildings cropping up beside the road more frequently as they approached the township. From the outside, it seemed to be a peaceful yet eternal town, as so many did in the kingdom of Arundel. Taryn pulled the wagon over in what looked like the central marketplace. The large dog bounded to the ground and ran circles around the wagon the moment it stopped. "Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Frostvale," Taryn said as the others disembarked the wagon. "Now, I suggest we get 2 rooms in the local inn over there," Taryn said, pointing towards a quaint but shabby-looking building. "I'm not sleeping in a building made of dead trees," Nessa said as she watched the hustle and bustle of the townsfolk in disgust. "How do any of you live like this? So many competing sounds and smells, and no green to speak of." "Well, it beats sleeping outside, my nature-loving friend," Balanos retorted as he helped Taryn to hand out each of their various packs before patting the dog on the head. "I think once we are settled, we should start asking around the town about this Hanged Men Gang," Taryn suggested. "For the last time, will you stop giving us orders?" Nessa snapped, as seemed to be her way. "I think we should stick together. If what we have been told about this gang is true, I don't think they will take kindly to us probing the town's inhabitants," Thalia said quietly. "I don't think we should speak to anyone. People lie. We'd be better off watching from a distance until we see some shady people, and then following them," Artair said as he looked up to the rooftops of the nearest buildings. "Well, I think we should go to the first tavern we find and buy the room a round of drinks with our little bit of spending money. People are always more chatty once they've had a few drinks," Balanos countered with a smile. "You're both wrong. These people will know nothing of use to us. Our best bet is to go somewhere away from all of these buildings and get information from the only reliable source, the trees," Nessa chimed in. The group stood around the wagon, looking at each other seriously, as if each thought that their plan was the most sane. Taryn broke the silence. "All right. Well, we know what information we're after, right? The whereabouts of this gang, obviously. We aren't all as stupid as you are," Nessa hissed. Balanos gestured with his palms upturned. "Why don't we split up then? It sounds like we all have a reasonable shot at finding out the information we need, then back to the inn for a debrief." "That may be the first smart thing you have said, old man. But, dare I say, it's only because you want to go and drink yourself silly on our coin, is it not?" Nessa replied. "No, but that is certainly a perk," Balanos said with a shrug. The group went their separate ways, leaving Taryn to inquire about some rooms for at least a few evenings. Out of all of them, Taryn thought he had the best chance of finding out the information they needed. After speaking with the innkeeper and securing the rooms, Taryn took the opportunity to ask a question. "Say, my good sir, we are travelling onwards to the Medway River, and we heard on the road that there was a vicious gang hanging around these parts. Are the rumours true?" At the mention of the word gang, the old innkeeper went as white as marble. "There ain't no gangs in these parts. I'd appreciate it if you'd not mention it again. I don't want you scaring away me guests with false stories." And with that, the old man handed over the 2 room keys and retreated into his office behind the desk. Taryn made his way back outside to bring the horses and wagon around and into the stables, wondering at the innkeeper's strange reaction. Perhaps he was just nervous about strangers bringing up anything that might upset his otherwise quiet establishment. Taryn closed the barn doors behind him. If there was more to it than that, they were sure to find out soon enough. Taryn made his way back to the town's market square, his eyes peeled for anyone who looked like they may know the goings-on of the small town. Nessa made straight for the outskirts, not back the way they had come, but toward the north. She wasn't familiar with the area, or any land aside from Foyle Forest for that matter, but she knew that once she got away from all these people, she would be able to commune with nature as she had learnt to many years ago. Nessa walked a considerable distance away from the town, following a hedgerow that lay to the side of the northern road. She came across a thicket of shrubs surrounding a large, gnarled oak tree whose boughs stretched out in all directions. Along one of the thicker branches that hung over the road, remnants of rope were tied in several places. Not thinking much of it, Nessa crawled in under the shrubs and sat at the base of the tree, camouflaged by the greenery so as to not be disturbed by any nosy passers-by. She leaned over and placed a hand on the tree's trunk. "Hello, old soul. My name is Nessa. I'm sure you haven't been spoken to in quite some time, if ever, so I just wanted to start off by introducing myself. I am of the Foyle Druids and hail from a forest far away from here. May your roots grow deep and your offspring be many," she said in an ear whisper. The tree's branches swished in the breeze, groaning as they rubbed together. "It's all right, my friend. We don't need to get to things so quickly. Please, take your time. It sounds like you haven't used your voice in a very long while." Balanos pushed the tavern's door open with gusto. The dark, dingy pub had a few small tables in the front and one large one in the back, over to the right of the bar. He made his way across the room and sat at one of the available stools by the bar. "Barkeep, what do you have that's fresh?" Balanos said with enthusiasm. The bartender walked over holding a large tankard. He was a portly man with a grubby apron, the corner of which he was using to clean the vessel. "Hello, stranger. Fresh you're after, is it? Well, we have a barrel of fine dark ale I tapped only a night's past. Or we have some red wine, but I fear it's more like vinegar at this point," the bartender replied, putting the tankard down on the bar top. "I'll have the ale if you please, and a round for the house and the rest of the bar. I've got some small coin and I wish to spread it around," Balanos announced. With that, there was a small cheer from 5 or 6 occupants who seemed to be in their cups from the night before. Thalia stood in front of the inn, scratching the dog's head and watching in amusement as the townsfolk bustled this way and that. Seeing common folk go about their business was fascinating to her. Every interaction seemed so much more casual than those of the palace staff. People would stop and chat with their neighbours, or have a seat and stretch their backs while smoking a pipe. She had never seen people act so relaxed toward one another. Thalia noticed an old woman sweeping the front porch of what looked like a bakery. Thalia had barely seen the palace servants at work. The second she entered a room or hallway, they would all stop and bow. After watching for a while, Thalia thought it looked like something she could do. She crossed the street to the wooden building and approached the old woman. The lady was probably in her 60s, with a hunched back and flour all over her apron. Forgetting the group's mission for the moment, Thalia asked, "Excuse me, but would you like a hand with that?" "Huh? What was that, dear?" The lady replied, cupping her hand around her ear. "You'll have to speak up. I'm deaf as a doorpost, you know." Still thrilled at the way normal people spoke to her, Thalia raised her voice and tried to speak clearly. "Can I give you a hand with that?" "Oh, this? Sure. But I ain't giving you a discount on me goods, though. Times is tough enough without handouts," the woman replied, leaning on her broom. "Oh no, that won't be necessary. It just looked like you could use a hand," Thalia said. With that, the old lady handed the broom to Thalia and raised her hands in a gesture that showed she was done with the job, before she sat down on a small bench by the shop's door. "Have you lived in this town long?" Thalia asked as she attempted to mimic the old lady's sweeping technique. "Only all my life. Where'd you think I'd be from? Dangerous to go travelling outside your hometown, don't you know that?" the old lady said with a scoff. "No, I didn't, I'm afraid. But I don't see why one shouldn't, regardless," Thalia replied with amusement. "Foolish girl, where have you come from that you just wander about so?" Thalia gave the woman a sad smile. "A long way away. I haven't had much experience doing anything, to be perfectly honest." "There it is. Oh, my sweet thing. Everyone knows you don't go a-wandering." Thalia smiled as she realized her job was half done. She already felt like she had learned so much, and it was only her first day in this town. The princess was admiring her work when a young man walked out of the bakery and stopped, shocked to see a stranger sweeping. "You're not Ma," the man said quizzically. "I'm over here, boy." The young man turned to see the old lady on the bench. "This here lass is giving these old bones a rest, which is more than you ever do. Would you quit it, Ma? Not in front of company." Thalia finished sweeping and leant the broom against the shop front, looking sheepish. For a moment, the young man only stared, taking in the young woman in front of him. Finally, he caught himself and said, "Ah, young miss, pay me Ma no mind. She's old and grouchy. Thank you for helping. Don't let her make you do any more chores now, otherwise I'll never hear the end of it." Stooping down to grasp the hands of the older lady, he looked her in the face. "Now, Ma, I'm off to the tavern. All the pastries and loaves are ready for market tomorrow. I'll see you later tonight when I come home." The old woman huffed. "Don't you stay out too long now. I don't like those new men you've been hanging around." "I know, Ma." Turning to Thalia, the young man whispered, "Thanks again for helping. If you're around tomorrow, I'll make sure to give you a nice discount if you like." And with that, he gave her a wink and walked off in the direction of the tavern. Smiling, Thalia walked back to the inn. After making sure Brutus had enough water and food in the stables, she went up to their rooms, marvelling at how nice common people seemed to be. Artair knew nothing of note would happen during the day. All shady goings-on happened after dusk. Everyone should know that. He walked between two buildings and made for the taller one at the end of the alleyway. Deftly swinging his way up to the rooftop with his grappling hook, he quietly walked to the point where two rooftops met. He crouched down into a position from which he could view the town square, but where it would be difficult to spot him from ground level. Folding his arms, he began to meditate, in a practice he called finding the moment. Artair used this technique when a specific window of time was required to pull off one of his jobs. He focused in on the town, the loud calling of the traders, the buyers disgruntled at the cost of goods, the children playing in the street, and the religious leaders beckoning the townsfolk to convert to their specific alignments. Before he knew it, he was in a sort of trance. When he finally opened his eyes, it was dusk. Balanos had the entire tavern in a jig. Many patrons had entered since Balanos had arrived, and all of the tables and places to stand were taken up by sweaty common folk. A man with a lute was standing on a table, strumming away while singing a catchy tune Balanos hadn't heard before. The whole establishment seemed more alive than it perhaps had any right to be. With his portion of the gold given to them by the benefactor, he had shown the town's sleepy tavern quite an evening. A young man pushed through the crowd over to him and clinked his tankard against Balanos's. "Thanks, mister, for them drinks. I ain't remember a night when the old duck-down tavern has been so festive." "Not to worry, Balanos hiccuped. "My lad, 'tis what coin was meant to be spent on. We can't all be like the princess and have this kind of night every night, now can we?" The room shifted and swayed in time with the lutenist's performance, and right at the height of the song, the whole crowd sang along. Once the room had quieted down again, the young man leaned in. "Princess? You know a princess? How's that possible?" "I dunno. Crazy world this is, right? But I do, and she's not quite what I expected from a princess either." Again Balanos hiccuped. "Besides, if you've been around as long as I have, you're bound to be surprised sometimes, eh?" The young man leaned in to whisper into Balanos's ear. Do you know where she is?" Taking another gulp from his tankard, Balanos turned to face the young man. "You seem like a friendly fellow, so I let you in on a little secret," Balanos said with a brash grin. He held the boy's head closer so that only he could hear. "She's actually in the inn as we speak." Laughing as he released the boy, Balanos swayed back and nearly toppled off his stool. As he tried to regain his balance, he was swept up in a type of circle dance he hadn't performed in years, disappearing into the crowd as he sang along in drunken gibberish. The sun had set behind the rooftops a while ago, and darkness engulfed the town. Getting to his feet, Artair looked out into the town square, which at this hour was devoid of people, except those wandering over to the now lively tavern. Artair could see the silhouettes of people moving about through the windows, even from this distance. He stalked along the rooftops, his keen eyes searching for anyone acting strangely or attempting to conceal their movements. As he wandered further away from the tavern, he spied 4 men walking in from the northern edge of town. They looked like unsavoury figures to Artair. They were all carrying weapons, which in itself wasn't an oddity, except that they also held what looked like iron fetters. Artair leapt from rooftop to rooftop until he could clearly see and hear the 4 men. They seemed drunk and were jabbering about another town that had 3 taverns and many more young women than Frostvale. The way the men talked about those women made Artair's stomach turn. These were, in fact, unsavoury men indeed. He followed them as they rounded a few corners, stopped to take a piss in an alleyway, then walked out into the centre of town. They seemed to be heading for the tavern, and Artair was planning on waiting around until they left again, when a young man who had been leaning against the tavern's doorsill ran up to meet them. On silent feet, Artair moved to a rooftop closer to the tavern's entrance, but by the time he arrived, it seemed their conversation was nearly over. Catching only their last few words, Artair realised they were congratulating the young man and had agreed to split up. The young man pocketed what looked like a coin pouch and went back into the tavern, while the 4 other men spread out across the town square. Now who to follow? The tallest and meanest looking of them seemed to be their leader, as he was pointing in different directions and appeared to do most of the talking. He carried a massive warhammer strapped to his back and wore a cruel smirk as he began to walk toward the inn. Artair followed the tall man, sneaking across the rooftops. The man walked casually through the streets, but was obviously looking out for something or someone. He walked a few times around the inn, back to the square, and then back to the inn again. Finally, he returned to the town square and then walked away from it, toward the northern end of town. As they reached the outskirts, he leant against a wall, lit a pipe, and seemed to just wait. Artair had been perched on his concealed rooftop for some time when he heard hushed voices and saw the other 3 men hurrying down the street, carrying what looked like a bundle of sheets between them. The men exchanged a few quiet words with one another, then left by the northern road. Artair quickly considered his options and decided to leave the safety of the rooftops to follow these men. After they had walked for a while down the main road, the men diverted down a narrower, more unkempt path and through a thicket of oak trees, before reaching what looked like a small cabin with a barn. He watched them take the bundle into the barn, then after a while, walk out and over to the cottage, closing the door behind them. Thinking that he had all the evidence he needed, Artair swiftly made his way back to the inn. Taran had made his way back to the inn, and was recounting his day of questioning the townsfolk to Nessa and Balanos. He had asked anyone who he thought might have a clue of the gang's whereabouts, only to be turned down by everyone, as though they couldn't believe a gang would be in their midst, and it was rude to even suggest such a thing. That changed when he stopped by the blacksmiths, who pulled him quickly inside and in hushed tones told Taran of a group, he wasn't sure of their name, that had been wreaking havoc on the small town for a month now. Pushing back tears, the blacksmith admitted that they had hung his son a few weeks back because the old-timer had refused to give them the cache of weapons he and his son had been working on for the Arundel army. No one in the town seemed to care. They all went about their own business, as if nothing had happened. Bastards, Taran said, shaking his head. I approached this old man sitting by himself in the tavern. People seemed to give him a wide berth. I sat down and asked him what ailed him, and he started to cry, the poor fellow. Says it was his brother, the butcher. Balanos said with a belch. Hung for not doing something or other. I could barely make out what he was on about. He was already twice as sauce as I was. I didn't think anything of it till now." The old ranger slurred before laying down on one of the beds. Taryn could hear an odd little whimper, but he thought it must just be the wheezing of the old man, so he thought nothing more of it. "That sounds about right. Civilized people these are. No wonder my people refuse to make peace with you all," Nessa said while pacing the room. "That does make sense though. The old oak tree to the north of town said as many as 10 people in the last month have been hung from his boughs." "Wait, you, spoke to a tree?" Balanos mumbled, giving Nessa a bemused look. "Never you mind, drunk." Nessa spat the last word with disgust at the state of the old archer. "Listen, the others should be back by now. I'm starting to worry," Taryn said as he heard the whimpering again, this time a little louder. Taryn was about to voice his concern at the sound when Artair burst into the room, heaving. "Now where have you been, boy?" Nessa snapped, as Artair doubled over to catch his breath. "Just been following some men," he said, panting. "Think they might be part of this gang." "How can you be sure?" Taryn asked. "They met with someone from the town and made off with what I now think was someone from the inn. They had a bundle all wrapped up, which could have easily been a person." They all looked at one another, concern growing on their faces. As his breath steadied, Artair looked about the room. "Where's the princess?" To be continued. That was The Hanged Men Gang Part 2. It is the second episode of the season. If you have missed Part 1, consider going back and checking it out. If you have enjoyed this video, please leave a like and comment any feedback you have, and consider subscribing as there will be more tales to come. This was a Tallow Tale. Thanks for watching.